I thought I understood what betrayal felt like. Losing my job after 26 years driving truck, my ex-wife taking half of everything I'd worked for. But nothing prepared me for the moment I realized the woman I'd married, the woman who promised to love only me, had been sharing that love with 3 other men the entire time. And the worst part? I wasn't even her first choice. I was just the one stupid enough to keep paying for it all. They say love makes you blind. But in the Philippines, it made me completely invisible. I became a ghost in my own marriage, funding a life that was never really mine. Some mistakes you can drive away from. This one followed me home. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers from Kelowna, Canada. He asked us not to share his name, but he wanted his experience heard. I'd been driving truck for 26 years when the company downsized me out of existence. 54 years old, living in Kelowna, with nothing but a pension that barely covered rent and the echo of my ex-wife's voice telling me I'd never amount to anything. The house felt too big and too empty. My daughter called maybe once a month, and even then, it was just to check if I was still breathing. I wasn't living anymore. I was just existing, day after day, watching the mountains outside my window and wondering if this was all there was left. The silence in that apartment was killing me. Every morning I'd wake up and think about Linda, about how she'd left me for her yoga instructor, about how she'd said I was boring and predictable. "You never take risks, Ron," she'd said during our last fight. "You're content to just drift through life." Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been drifting. But at 54, what was I supposed to do? Start over? The idea seemed impossible until I found those expat forums. Stories of Western men finding new lives in Southeast Asia, where their modest pensions could stretch like luxury, and where women still appreciated a man who worked hard. The Philippines kept coming up. Warm weather, English speaking, and a culture that respected older men. I started researching, watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts. Men my age, divorced, retired, finding love and purpose in places I'd never even considered visiting. "Best decision I ever made," one guy wrote. "I'm living like a king here for what I used to spend on groceries back home." Another man posted photos of himself and his young Filipino wife, both smiling on a beach somewhere. "She takes care of me like I'm the most important man in the world," he wrote. "Filipino women know how to treat their men." I started imagining myself in those photos, in those stories. Maybe I could start over. Maybe 54 wasn't too late to find something real. The pension I'd been viewing as barely enough to survive might actually be enough to live somewhere else. I spent weeks researching, calculating costs, reading success stories. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this was my chance. My chance to prove Linda wrong. My chance to find a woman who would appreciate me for who I was, not constantly remind me of who I wasn't. I created profiles on dating sites, uploaded my best photos, started looking for someone who might see something in me that Linda never did. That's when I found Carmen. Her name was Carmen, and she was nothing like the women I'd known in Canada. 24, working as a real estate agent in Quezon City, with a smile that could light up my laptop screen. She found me on Filipino Cupid, said she was looking for a serious relationship with a mature man who understood commitment. We started chatting every day, morning coffee for me, evening wind down for her. She'd tell me about her work, showing clients apartments and condos, how she was saving money to help her family. "I don't want games, Ron," she wrote to me one night. "I want real love. Someone who will be loyal to me, and I will be loyal to him. Forever." The word forever hit me like a truck. When was the last time someone had talked about forever with me? Linda had stopped talking about our future years before she left. But Carmen, she talked about our future like it was already decided. "When you come to the Philippines," she'd write, "not if. When we get married, not if we get married." The conversations stretched into hours. She'd call me my king, ask about my trucking days, listen to my stories about the road. She wanted to know everything about Canada, about my life, about my dreams. "You're so interesting," she'd type during our video calls. "You've seen so much of the world. I'd never thought of myself as interesting before." Linda used to fall asleep when I talked about work, but Carmen hung on every word, asked follow-up questions, made me feel like my experiences mattered. When I told her about my divorce, she held her phone closer to the camera and said, "She didn't deserve you. A real woman supports her man." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Support. When was the last time I'd felt supported? Carmen made me feel like I was worth something again. She'd send me good morning messages with heart emojis, ask about my day, tell me she was thinking about me. "I can't wait to take care of you," she'd write, "to cook for you, to make you happy. You deserve to be happy, Ron." I started sending her small gifts, nothing crazy, just $50 here and there for her phone load, maybe $100 when she mentioned her mother needed medicine. She'd always protest at first. "You don't need to do that, baby. You're too good to me." But I wanted to do it. I wanted to take care of her the way she promised to take care of me. "It makes me happy to help you," I'd tell her, and it was true. For the first time in years, I felt needed. I felt like I had a purpose beyond just existing. Carmen would send me photos of herself at work, professional and beautiful in her business clothes. She'd tell me about difficult clients, about long days, about how much she was looking forward to relaxing with me when I came to visit. "I'm working so hard to make myself worthy of you," she'd write. Worthy of me. The idea that this beautiful, young, successful woman thought she needed to make herself worthy of me was almost too much to process. I started planning my trip, researching flights, hotels, what I needed to bring. Carmen was so excited. "I'm going to show you everything," she promised. "Manila, Tagaytay, maybe even Boracay. I want you to fall in love with my country the way I've fallen in love with you." Fallen in love with me. She'd said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'd been afraid to say it first, afraid it was too soon, afraid I'd scare her away. But she'd beaten me to it, and the relief was overwhelming. "I love you too, Carmen," I typed back. More than I thought. I could love anyone again. 3 months of daily conversations, video calls, messages, small gifts, and growing feelings. I booked my flight to Manila, counting down the days until I could hold her in my arms. I'd never felt so hopeful about the future. I'd never felt so sure that I was making the right choice. Carmen was going to change everything. She was going to make me happy in a way I'd never been happy before. She was going to prove that Linda was wrong about me. I wasn't boring. I wasn't predictable. I was a man worthy of love, worthy of loyalty, worthy of a future. At least, that's what I thought. 3 months later, I was on a plane to Manila, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Carmen picked me up at the airport, even more beautiful in person, wearing a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. She threw her arms around me right there in arrivals, and for the first time in years, I felt like I mattered to someone. "Welcome home, my love," she whispered in my ear. Home. The word sent shivers down my spine. I'd left Canada feeling like I was escaping, but Carmen made it feel like I was arriving. She'd booked us a hotel in Makati. Nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. That first night, lying next to her, listening to her breathe, I couldn't believe this was real. This beautiful woman, this incredible feeling of being wanted, of being loved. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to wake up next to someone who was happy to see me. "Good morning, my king," she said, kissing my forehead. "Did you sleep well?" I had slept well, better than I had in months. That first week was everything I dreamed about and more. Carmen showed me around the city, introduced me to her friends, took me to her favorite restaurants. Everyone was so friendly, so welcoming. "This is my boyfriend from Canada," she'd say proudly. "He's a retired truck driver. Very successful." The way she said it, with such pride, made me stand a little taller. In Canada, being a truck driver wasn't something people bragged about. But here, Carmen made it sound like the most impressive job in the world. We went to malls, to churches, to parks. She held my hand everywhere we went, introducing me to anyone who would listen. "This is Ron," she'd say. "He's going to marry me." The confidence in her voice, the certainty, made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But even during that perfect week, I started noticing things. Her phone was always buzzing. She'd step away to take calls, speaking rapid Tagalog, coming back with apologetic smiles. "Just work, baby." Some clients are very demanding. I understood. Real estate was a demanding job. But the calls seemed to come at odd hours, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. "Do you always have to work so much?" I asked one evening after she'd spent 20 minutes on the phone during dinner. "I'm sorry, baby. I know it's annoying, but I have to work hard to build my client base. For us, you know, for our future. Our future." The words made my chest warm, and I forgot about the phone calls. And the money. She always seemed to need something. Her rent was due, her phone bill, her mother's medication. I didn't mind helping. What's the point of having money if you can't take care of the woman you love? "You don't have to do this," she'd say when I'd hand her cash. "I feel bad asking you." "You're not asking," I'd tell her. "I'm offering. I want to take care of you." And I did. Every peso I gave her felt like an investment in our future, in our happiness. She'd kiss me so gratefully, tell me how lucky she was to have found me. "You're different from other men," she'd say. "You have a good heart." By the end of that first trip, I was completely smitten. This woman, this country, this life, we were building together. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go back to that empty apartment in Kelowna, back to the loneliness, back to the silence. But I had to. I had things to arrange, plans to make. Carmen cried when I left for the airport. "I'm going to miss you so much," she sobbed. "Promise me you'll come back soon." I promised. I promised I'd come back, and I promised I'd stay longer next time, maybe forever. The flight home felt like torture. Every mile between us felt like a physical pain. I spent the entire flight planning our future, imagining what it would be like to wake up next to her every morning, to build a life together in the Philippines. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. I had someone to look forward to. Carmen texted me as soon as I landed. "I miss you already, my love. Hurry back to me." I was already planning my return trip before I even got home. By the end of that first trip, I knew I wanted to marry her. The thought had been growing in my mind all week, but seeing her cry at the airport, feeling the physical pain of separation, made it clear. I didn't want to spend another day without her. I didn't want to go through another goodbye. I wanted to make her mine forever, and I wanted to be hers. Back in Kelowna, I started planning. I researched engagement rings, trying to find something beautiful but within my budget. I wasn't a rich man, but I wanted to give her something special, something that would show her how much she meant to me. I found a simple gold band with a small diamond in a jewelry store downtown. It wasn't much, but it was what I could afford. "She'll love it," the salesperson assured me. "It's not about the size of the diamond. It's about the love behind it." I hoped she was right. I called Carmen that night, my heart pounding. "I have something to ask you," I said. "Something important." "What is it, baby?" she asked, her voice soft and curious. "I want to marry you, Carmen. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard her gasp, heard her start to cry. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." I'd never felt relief like that in my life. I love you so much, Ron. I can't believe this is happening. I'm going to be your wife. The happiness in her voice, the pure joy, made everything feel right. I booked my flight back to Manila the next day, the ring burning a hole in my pocket. When I got down on one knee in that little hotel room in Makati, Carmen cried like I'd never seen anyone cry before. She held the ring like it was the most precious thing in the world. "It's beautiful," she sobbed. "It's perfect. I'm so happy, Ron. I'm so happy. I will be the best wife to you," she promised through her tears. "I promise. Only you, forever. I will love you and take care of you for the rest of my life. Only you, forever." The words were exactly what I needed to hear. We started planning the wedding immediately. Carmen wanted something small but traditional, in a church with our friends and family. I didn't have much family to invite, just my daughter who probably wouldn't come anyway. But Carmen's family welcomed me like I was already one of them. Her mother hugged me and called me son. Her father shook my hand and thanked me for making his daughter happy. "She's a good girl," he said in broken English. "She will be a good wife to you." I believed him. I believed all of them. Planning the wedding from Canada was complicated, but Carmen handled most of it. She needed money for the preparations, for her dress, for the reception. I sent her $2,000, then another $1,500 when she said the church required a bigger donation. "I hate asking you for money," she said during one of our video calls. "I feel like you'll think I'm only with you for your money." "Carmen, stop," I said firmly. "I know you love me. I know this is real. And I want to help. I want our wedding to be perfect." She smiled through her tears. "You're too good to me, Ron. I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything," I told her. "You deserve the world." I meant it. I would have given her the world if I could have. While she planned the wedding, I planned my new life. I sold my truck, the one possession I'd thought I'd never part with. I liquidated my savings account, keeping just enough to cover the wedding expenses and our first few months together. My pension would cover my living expenses in the Philippines, and I had about $40,000 left from selling everything. It felt like enough. It felt like more than enough to start a new life with the woman I loved. The wedding was small but perfect. Carmen looked like an angel in white, walking down the aisle of that little church in Quezon City. Her dress was simple but elegant, her smile brighter than any diamond. When we said our vows, she looked right into my eyes and promised to love, honor, and remain faithful to me until death. "I promise to be your loyal and devoted wife," she said, her voice strong and clear. "To love only you, to support you, to make you happy for the rest of our lives together." I believed every word. How could I not? Looking at her face, seeing the love in her eyes, hearing the conviction in her voice. This was real. This was the beginning of everything I'd dreamed about. "I promise to love and protect you," I said back. "To provide for you, to make you happy, to be the husband you deserve." When the priest said we were man and wife, when Carmen kissed me in front of everyone, I felt like the luckiest man alive. This was my second chance. This was my happily ever after. Carmen was my wife now, and I was her husband. Only us. Forever. Just like she'd promised. We moved into a small apartment in Quezon City, and I started my new life as a married expat. The apartment was modest but comfortable, with a small living room, one bedroom, and a kitchen where Carmen promised to cook all my favorite meals. "This is our home," she said, showing me around proudly. Our first home together. It felt surreal, having a home with someone again. Having someone to share meals with, someone to wake up next to, someone who cared about my day. Carmen continued working at the real estate agency, leaving early in the morning and coming home late. She said the market was competitive, that she needed to work hard to build her client base. "I'm doing this for us, baby," she'd say when I complained about her long hours. "So we can have a better life. So We can maybe buy our own place someday. I understood. I'd worked long hours too when I was driving truck. But sometimes I felt lonely in that apartment, waiting for her to come home, watching Filipino television shows I didn't understand, missing the sound of her voice. Maybe I could get a job too, I suggested one evening. Help out with the expenses. Carmen looked at me like I'd suggested something crazy. Baby, you're retired. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me take care of us now. Let me be the one who works hard. It was sweet, the way she wanted to take care of me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just existing again, like I had been in Kelowna, but in a different country. The money was disappearing faster than I'd expected. Rent, utilities, groceries, her transportation costs, money for her family. It all added up quicker than I'd calculated. Carmen always had a reason, always had an emergency. Her cousin needed surgery. Her nephew needed school supplies. Her mother's medication had gotten more expensive. In the Philippines, we take care of family, she explained one night after I'd questioned another $500 request. It's our way. We don't abandon our family like people do in the West. You understand, right? I understood. I wanted to understand. I wanted to be a good husband, a good provider. I wanted to respect her culture, her values. But my pension was only $1,800 a month, and between our expenses and her family's needs, I was dipping into my savings every month. When I mentioned it to Carmen, she'd get quiet and sad. Maybe I'm not a good wife, she'd say, her voice small and hurt. Maybe you'd be happier with someone else. Maybe you should go back to Canada. No, baby, that's not what I meant. I'd quickly reassure her, reaching for her hand. I love you. I love our life. I just want to make sure we're being smart with money. I know, she'd say, leaning into me. I'm sorry. I know I ask for a lot, but my family depends on me. They've always depended on me. I can't just abandon them now that I have a husband. The guilt in her voice, the way she'd look at me like she was disappointing me, always made me feel terrible. We'll figure it out, I'd tell her. We always do. And we did, somehow. I'd transfer more money from my savings. We'd pay whatever needed to be paid, and life would go on. Carmen would be grateful and loving, extra attentive for a few days, reminding me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. But then another emergency would come up, another family member would need help, and we'd go through the same cycle again. I told myself it was normal. Marriage was about compromise, about supporting each other. Carmen was supporting me emotionally, making me feel loved and needed. It was only fair that I supported her financially. That's what husbands did. That's what love looked like. The phone calls got more frequent as the months went by. Carmen would step out onto the balcony, speaking in hushed Tagalog, sometimes for an hour at a time. When I asked who it was, she'd always have an answer ready. A client looking for a specific property. Her boss discussing a new listing. Her cousin with family drama. Sorry, baby, she'd say, kissing my cheek. You know how Filipinos are. We talk too much. I'd smile and nod, but something felt off. The calls came at odd hours, sometimes late at night when most real estate clients would be sleeping. Sometimes early in the morning before most offices opened. And the tone of her voice, even though I couldn't understand the words, didn't sound like business calls. It sounded personal, intimate even. But I wasn't stupid. I'd been married before. I knew the signs. The way she'd quickly hang up when I walked into the room. The way she'd put her phone face down on the table during dinner. The way she'd started sleeping with her phone under her pillow instead of charging it on the nightstand like she used to. Carmen? Is everything okay? I asked one evening after she'd spent 2 hours on the balcony. Of course, baby. Why would you ask? She was folding laundry, not looking at me. You just seem distracted lately, like your mind is somewhere else. She stopped folding and came over to sit on my lap, running her fingers through my hair. "My mind is always with you, Ron. You're my husband, my only love." But, even as she said it, her phone was buzzing on the table. She glanced at it, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not annoyance, but something else. Excitement? Anticipation? She ignored it, but I could feel her body tense with the effort. "Who keeps calling you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just work stuff. You know how demanding clients can be." The phone buzzed again and again. "Maybe you should answer it," I suggested. "It might be important." "No," she said quickly. "It's not important. You're important. This is important." She kissed me, but I could feel her distraction. Her phone kept buzzing, and with each buzz, she seemed to pull further away from me even while sitting in my lap. "Carmen, just answer it. I don't mind." She looked at me for a long moment, then picked up the phone. "Hello?" Her voice immediately changed, became softer, more intimate. She started speaking in Tagalog, her tone completely different from the business calls I'd overheard before. This wasn't about real estate. This was personal. She caught me watching her and turned away, walking back to the balcony. I sat there listening to her laugh, listening to her voice take on that special tone she usually reserved for me. My stomach started to twist. When she came back 20 minutes later, she was smiling. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes, baby. Just family stuff. You know how it is." But she was lying. I could feel it in my bones. That wasn't a family call. That was something else entirely. Something she didn't want me to know about. I started paying closer attention after that. The calls, the messages, the way she'd light up when her phone rang, the way she'd step outside or go to the bathroom to take certain calls, the way she'd sometimes come home from work glowing with a happiness that felt different from the happiness she showed me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was letting my experience with Linda color my perception of Carmen. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way she'd pull away from me sometimes, lost in thought. In the way she'd check her phone obsessively, like she was waiting for something. In the way she'd sometimes say another name in her sleep, a name I didn't recognize. I wanted to ask her about it directly, but I was afraid of what she might say, afraid of what I might learn, afraid that this perfect life I'd built might all be a lie. So I said nothing. I watched and worried and hoped I was wrong. But every day, the feeling grew stronger. Something was happening, something I didn't understand, something that was going to change everything. I found the first evidence by accident. It was a Thursday evening, and Carmen had gone to take a shower after complaining about a long day at work. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen table. Something she never did. I was walking past when a Facebook message popped up on the screen. It was from a man named Miguel, and the preview showed, "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love. I've missed your." The message cut off, but I could see enough. My heart started pounding. I stood there, staring at the screen, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was innocent. But the word love kept echoing in my head. No client called someone love. No family member talked about missing someone in that way. My hands shook as I moved the cursor over the message. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was wrong to invade her privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. I clicked on the conversation. Months of messages scrolled before my eyes. Love messages. Sexual messages. Messages about meeting up, about missing each other, about being together. "I can't wait to feel your hands on me again," Carmen had written just 2 days ago. "Tuesday feels so far away." "You drive me crazy, baby," Miguel had responded. "I count the minutes until I can hold you." I scrolled up, my vision blurring. More messages, more intimate conversations. And it wasn't just Miguel. There were other tabs open, other conversations. A man named Paulo, another with someone called JR. all of them calling her baby, all of them making plans to see her, all of them talking to her like she was their girlfriend, their lover. I clicked on Paulo's conversation, messages going back even further. I bought that apartment for us. He'd written 6 months ago. Our little love nest. You're so good to me, Paulo. Carmen had responded. I love you so much. Love. She'd told him she loved him. She'd told Miguel she loved him. She'd told JR she loved him. The same words she said to me every day, the same promises she'd made to me. I scrolled through the messages, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. She was meeting Miguel on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Paulo on Saturdays. JR, whenever she said she was working late. And there were others. Men she'd been talking to on dating apps. Men she was making plans with. Men she was sending photos to. Photos I recognized. Photos she'd taken in our apartment. In our bed. Hey baby, what are you doing? Carmen's voice came from behind me. I turned around slowly, feeling like I was moving through water. She was standing in the doorway in a towel, her hair wet, looking at me with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then her eyes moved to the laptop screen, and her face went completely white. Who is Miguel? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Who is Paulo? I stood up, my legs shaking. Who is JR? Ron, I can explain. How many of them are there, Carmen? She started crying immediately, tears streaming down her face. It's not what you think, baby. They're just friends. I was just being friendly. Friendly? I turned the laptop toward her, showing her the messages. You told Miguel you loved him. You told Paulo you wanted to spend your life with him. You sent JR pictures of yourself naked in our bed. The towel slipped from her hands, and she fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically. I'm sorry, Ron. I'm so sorry. But you don't understand. I had to do this. Carmen dropped the towel and fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically. I'm sorry, Ron. I'm so sorry. But you don't understand. I have to do this. I have to survive. Survive? I stared down at her, my voice getting louder. I've been giving you everything. I sold my truck, my house, my entire life for you. It's not enough. She screamed back, her voice raw and desperate. Your pension, it's not enough for all of us. My family needs money. I need money. These men, they help me. They help us. I couldn't process what she was saying. So you're... What? You're prostituting yourself? No, it's not like that. She crawled toward me, reaching for my legs. I care about them. They care about me. Miguel, he's been helping me for 2 years. Paulo, he bought me this apartment before you came. JR, he pays for my mother's medication. Before I came, the words hit me like a physical blow. You were seeing all of them when you met me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But I love you too, Ron. I love all of you. Why can't you understand? In the Philippines, love is different. We can love more than one person. That's not love, Carmen. I don't even know what that is. Please don't leave me, she begged, crawling closer. I need you. We can make this work. You don't have to know about them. Just pretend it's only us. I'll be more careful. I'll hide it better. Hide it better, like the problem was that I'd found out, not that she was doing it. You married me, I said, my voice breaking. You stood in that church and promised to love only me. You're my husband. You're my security. You're my future. And what are they? They're my present, she said quietly. They're how I survive right now. Miguel gives me money for my family. Paulo pays for this apartment. JR takes care of my mother. You take care of me? I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. So, I'm just, what? Another client? Another source of income? No, baby, you're different. You're special. You married me. You gave me your name. You made me respectable. Respectable? I laughed bitterly. You think this is respectable? You don't understand Filipino culture, she said, wiping her nose. Here, women do what they have to do to survive. We take care of our families. We use whatever advantages we have. Advantages? My youth. My beauty. My ability to make men love me. The casual way she said it, like it was just another skill, made my stomach turn. So you never loved me at all? I do love you, she insisted. I love the security you give me. I love the way you take care of me. I love that you're kind and gentle and predictable. Predictable, the word Linda had used, the word that had driven me halfway around the world. You think I'm boring too? Not boring. Safe. Reliable. Miguel is exciting, but he's poor. Paolo is generous, but he's married. JR is fun, but he's young and stupid. You're different. You're stable. You're my husband. I'm your meal ticket. You're my future. She corrected. When I get old, when my beauty fades, when the other men leave me, you'll still be there. You'll still take care of me. That's love, Ron. That's real love. I looked at her kneeling on the floor, naked and crying, and I felt something die inside me. Not just my love for her, but my faith in love itself. Get up, I said quietly. Get dressed. She scrambled to her feet, hope flickering in her eyes. We can fix this, baby. We can make it work. I'll change. I'll be better. No, I said. You won't. This is who you are. This is who you've always been. Please, Ron. Don't give up on us. Don't give up on me. But I already had. I was already gone, even while standing in the same room with her. The man who had believed in her, who had loved her, who had trusted her, was dead. And I didn't know who was left in his place. I couldn't sleep that night. Carmen had gone to her sister's house after our fight, and I sat in the dark apartment, scrolling through her messages, piecing together the timeline of my own humiliation. She'd been with Miguel for 2 years, Paolo for 18 months, JR for 8 months. I'd been the most recent addition to her collection, the newest member of her stable of men. I read through months of conversations, each one a knife to my heart. The worst part was reading their conversations about me. She called me the Canadian with them. Not her husband, not Ron, just the Canadian. Like I was a thing, not a person. The Canadian sent me money for my mother's medicine. She'd write to Miguel. The Canadian is taking me to Boracay next month, she'd tell Paolo. The Canadian bought me a new dress. She'd inform JR. I wasn't her husband in these messages. I was just another resource to be managed, another source of income to be maintained. But what destroyed me completely was finding the group chat. Carmen had a group chat with 3 other women, her friends from the real estate agency. They were all doing the same thing. Multiple foreign boyfriends, multiple streams of income. They shared tips on how to manage their portfolios, how to keep the men from finding out about each other, how to maximize the money they could extract without raising suspicion. Never let them meet each other, one woman had written. Keep them in separate circles, separate lives. Always have a backup plan, another had added. If one finds out, you need 2 more ready to take his place. The older ones are the easiest, a third had contributed. They're so desperate to feel young again. They'll believe anything, and Carmen's contributions to the conversation made me physically sick. Ron is so easy, she'd written just last week. He believes everything I tell him. I think I can get him to buy me a car next month. The other women had laughed about it, using crying, laughing emojis. They'd shared their own stories of manipulating lonely Western men. "My German is talking about buying me a house," one had written. "My Australian wants to adopt my son," another had added. It was all a game to them. A business. A way to survive, as Carmen had put it. And I was just another Mark. Another lonely, desperate Western man who'd been stupid enough to believe that a beautiful young woman could actually love him. I read through months of these conversations, each message revealing another layer of the deception. They had code words for different types of men. ATMs, for the ones who just sent money. Lovers, for the ones they actually slept with. Husbands, for the ones they married for legal status. I was a husband, ATM hybrid, according to Carmen's classification. Best of both worlds, she'd written. Legal status and steady income. They shared photos of gifts they'd received, screenshots of money transfers, stories of successful manipulations. It was like reading a manual on how to destroy men like me, how to find our weaknesses, exploit our loneliness, milk us for everything we were worth. The key is to make them feel needed. Carmen had written in one particularly long message. These men, they've been rejected by their own women. They're desperate to feel important again. So you make them your hero. You make them feel like they're saving you. She'd been following the playbook perfectly. Every baby, I need your help. Every, you're my king. Every, I don't know what I'd do without you. It had all been calculated, all been designed to make me feel exactly what I'd felt. Important, needed, loved. But it had never been real. None of it had been real. I was just another transaction in Carmen's business of breaking hearts for profit. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, feeling like I was drowning. 26 years of marriage to Linda, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. But this was different. This was worse. Linda had at least been honest about not loving me anymore. Carmen had built an entire life on the lie of loving me. She'd married me on that lie. She'd made me believe in happily ever after on that lie. And now I was sitting in a foreign country, $30,000 poorer, legally married to a woman who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM with emotions. The apartment felt different now. Not like home. Not like the beginning of our life together. It felt like a crime scene. Like the place where my heart had been murdered. I could hear Carmen's key in the lock around midnight. She'd been crying. I could tell from her swollen eyes. She moved carefully, like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "Ron?" she called softly. "Baby, are you awake?" I was sitting on the couch in the dark, still in the same position I'd been in for hours. "I'm awake." She turned on the light, and I saw her face clearly. She looked genuinely devastated, but I couldn't trust that either. How could I trust anything about her ever again? "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything." "How long were you planning to keep this up?" I asked. "Forever," she said simply. "I was going to love you forever. All of you. I thought I could make it work." "And you saw nothing wrong with that?" "I saw everything wrong with it," she said, sitting down across from me. "But I also saw no other choice. This is my life, Ron. This is how I survive. By lying to everyone who cares about you. By doing what I have to do to take care of my family and myself." She looked at me with those beautiful eyes, the same eyes that had made me fall in love with her. "I wish I could be the woman you wanted me to be. I wish I could love only you, but I can't. This is who I am." At least she was being honest now. Finally, brutally honest. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now you decide," she said. "You can leave me and go back to Canada. Or you can stay and accept that this is who I am. Accept that I love you differently than you love me. And if I stay, then we pretend this conversation never happened. You stop looking at my phone. You stop asking questions. You trust me to handle my business, and I'll take care of you the way a wife should. Your business. My survival, Ron. My family's survival. Your survival too, whether you realize it or not. I stared at her, this woman I'd married, this stranger I'd never really known. And I realized I was facing a choice I'd never imagined having to make. Stay and live a lie. Or leave and lose everything I'd built my new life around. Either way, the man who had believed in love, who had believed in loyalty, who had believed in happily ever after, was gone forever. Carmen came back the next day with flowers and tears. White roses, my favorite, though I wondered now if she'd learned that from me or from one of the others. I broke up with all of them, she said, setting the flowers on the kitchen table. Miguel, Paulo, JR, everyone. I told them I'm married now and I can't see them anymore. It's just you and me now, baby, I promise. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly it physically hurt. We'd been married for 4 months. I'd invested everything in this relationship, in this life, in this woman. The thought of going back to Kelowna, to that empty apartment, to starting over again at 54 with $8,000 to my name, it was too much. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face the humiliation of Linda being right about me. "Show me your phone," I said. She handed it over without hesitation. She deleted all the conversations, blocked all the numbers. Her dating app profiles were gone. Her Facebook messages were clean. It looked like she'd really done it. "See?" she said, sitting next to me on the couch. "It's just you now. Only you. The way it should have been from the beginning. Why didn't you tell me?" "Oh," I asked. "Why didn't you just explain the situation instead of lying to me?" "Because I was afraid," she said simply. "I was afraid you'd leave me. I was afraid you'd think I was a bad woman. I was afraid you'd judge me for doing what I had to do to survive. But you married me while you were seeing them. I married you because I wanted to change. I wanted to be the woman you deserved. I thought maybe if I had a husband, a real husband, I could stop all the rest. But you didn't stop." "I tried," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I really tried. But the money, Ron. My family depends on me. My mother's medication costs $300 a month. My nephew's school fees. My cousin's rent. I couldn't just cut them off. So you cut me off instead. From the truth. I never cut you off from my love," she said. "I love you, Ron. I love you more than any of them. You're my husband. You're my future." We tried to rebuild. For 2 weeks, things seemed normal. Better than normal, even. Carmen came home earlier from work, spent more time with me, was more affectionate than she'd been in months. She cooked my favorite meals, watched movies with me, made love to me like she had during our honeymoon. But I could see the strain in her eyes, the way she'd stare at her phone even when it wasn't ringing, the way she'd get restless in the evenings, pacing around the apartment like a caged animal. She was like an addict going through withdrawal, and I was watching her slowly come apart. "Are you okay?" I asked one night when I found her crying in the bathroom. "I'm fine," she said. But she wasn't fine. She was grieving. Grieving the loss of her other relationships, her other sources of income, her other lives. I realized then that I hadn't just been sharing her with other men. I'd been sharing her with other versions of herself. With Miguel, she was passionate and wild. With Paulo, she was sophisticated and cultured. With JR, she was young and carefree. With me, she was stable and domestic. And now she was trapped in just one version of herself. The version that was my wife. "I miss them," she admitted one night. "I know that hurts you to hear, but I miss them. They were part of my life for so long." "I know," I said. Though it did hurt. It hurt more than I could express. "Maybe I'm selfish," she continued. "Maybe I'm greedy. But I liked having different people to talk to about different things. I liked being able to be different parts of myself." "You can be different parts of yourself with me," I offered. "No, I can't," she said sadly. "With you, I have to be a wife. I have to be respectable. I have to be the woman you married. And then the money requests started again. Her cousin needed surgery. Her nephew needed school supplies. Her mother's medication had gotten more expensive. The same stories, the same emergencies, the same desperate need for cash. But now, I knew the truth. These weren't necessarily real emergencies. They were just the cost of being Carmen's family. The cost of being dependent on a woman who made her living managing multiple relationships with multiple men. When I said I couldn't afford it, that my savings were almost gone, she'd get quiet and cold. "I sacrificed everything for you," she'd say. "I gave up my other friends for you. I gave up my income for you. And now you won't even help my family. Carmen, I've given you $30,000 in 8 months. I've given you everything I have. And what have I given you?" she'd ask. "I've given you my youth, my beauty, my body, my love. What's that worth to you?" I couldn't answer that question, because I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what any of it was worth if it wasn't real, if it wasn't exclusive, if it wasn't the kind of love I'd thought I was getting. "I need to go back to work," she said one evening. "Real work. The kind that pays." "You mean go back to them?" "I mean go back to surviving," she said. "Because we can't survive on your pension alone. You've seen the numbers. You know it's not enough." She was right. It wasn't enough. Not for her family's needs, not for her expectations, not for the life she wanted to live. I was never going to be enough. Not my money, not my love, not my devotion. I was never going to be enough for a woman who needed everything I had and more. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. I can't be your perfect wife. I can't love only you. I can't live on only what you can give me." "So you're choosing them over me?" "I'm choosing survival over fantasy," she said. "I'm choosing reality over whatever dream you brought here from Canada." The dream. That's what she called it. The dream of a woman who would love only me, who would be faithful only to me, who would build a life with only me. She was right. It had been a dream. A beautiful, impossible dream that had cost me everything. I caught her 3 weeks later. She said she was going to the grocery store to buy ingredients for dinner, but something in her voice made me suspicious. The way she'd gotten dressed up for a simple shopping trip, the way she'd put on makeup and perfume, the way she'd checked her phone right before leaving. I waited 5 minutes, then followed her. She took a taxi to Makati, to a hotel I didn't recognize. Not the one where we'd stayed during my first visit, but a nicer place, more expensive. She walked into the lobby like she owned it, confident and purposeful. She knew exactly where she was going. I waited in the parking lot, my heart pounding, hoping I was wrong, hoping she really was meeting a client, hoping there was some innocent explanation for why my wife was walking into a hotel dressed like she was going on a date. 2 hours later, she came out with a man I didn't recognize. Not Miguel, not Paolo, not JR. Someone new, someone she'd never mentioned. They were holding hands, laughing, looking at each other like lovers, like she used to look at me. He was younger than me, maybe 40, well-dressed, confident, Filipino but wealthy-looking, the kind of man who could afford to take a woman to nice hotels in the middle of the afternoon. He kissed her goodbye in the parking lot, a long, passionate kiss that made my stomach turn. Then he handed her an envelope. Money. He was paying her. Whether for sex or companionship or love, I didn't know. But he was paying her, and she was taking it. And they were both smiling like this was the most natural thing in the world. I followed her taxi home, staying a few cars behind. She stopped at the grocery store, bought a few items, then came home humming. Actually humming. Happy. Glowing. The way she used to glow when she came home to me. When she walked into the apartment, I was sitting on the couch, waiting. "Hi, baby," she said, kissing my cheek. "I got everything we need for dinner." "How was the grocery store?" "I was, Buh. I have a... Buh. But buh. I asked, my voice completely neutral. Fine, she said, not looking at me. Very crowded today. What did you buy? She paused, realizing she was only carrying a small bag. Oh, they didn't have everything I needed. I'll go back tomorrow. What didn't they have? Chicken. They were out of chicken. I'll come with you tomorrow, I said. Help you carry everything. No, she said quickly. I mean, you don't need to. I know what to get. It's easier if I just go alone. I don't mind, I pressed. We could make it a little date. Go shopping together, maybe get lunch. Ron, please. I said I'd handle it. Why don't you trust me? Trust. The word hung in the air between us like a weapon. I do trust you. I lied. I just want to spend time with you. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Tomorrow is busy for me. Maybe another day. That night, while she slept, I went through her phone. She'd been more careful this time, using a different messaging app. But the evidence was all there. Not just the old men, but new ones too. A teacher from Australia, a businessman from Germany, a retiree from New Zealand, and the man from the hotel whose name was Eduardo. She was managing 6 different relationships now, 6 different men who all thought they were special, 6 different men who were all giving her money, gifts, love, attention. I was one of 6, not even the most important one, based on the messages. Eduardo was paying her rent. The Australian was paying for her mother's medication. The German was talking about buying her a car. The New Zealander was planning to bring her to his country. And me? I was the husband, the legal status, the backup plan, the one who would still be there when all the others got tired of her or wise to her game. I screenshot everything. Every message, every photo, every conversation. I wanted proof. I wanted evidence of what my marriage really was, what my wife really was, what my love really meant to her. Then I put the phone back under her pillow and lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd become this person, this suspicious, paranoid, broken person, this man who followed his wife to hotels and searched through her phone like a detective. This wasn't who I'd been in Canada. This wasn't who I'd wanted to become. But this was who Carmen had made me. This was who I had to be to survive in her world. The next morning, she was sweet and affectionate, making me breakfast, asking about my plans for the day, acting like the perfect wife, acting like she hadn't spent the previous afternoon in bed with another man, acting like she hadn't been lying to me for our entire marriage. I love you, she said, kissing me goodbye before leaving for work. I love you too, I said back, because I still did. Despite everything, I still loved her. And that was the most pathetic part of all. I started doing the math. Sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and bank statements, adding up everything I'd given Carmen since we met. The gifts during our online courtship, the money for wedding expenses, the monthly transfers for her family's emergencies, the daily expenses of our married life, rent, food, utilities, transportation, clothes, phone bills, medical expenses. In the 8 months I'd been with Carmen, I'd given her nearly $30,000, my entire life savings, minus the $8,000 I had left. But it wasn't just my money. I started tracking her social media more carefully, her friend networks, trying to piece together the scope of her operation. Based on the messages I'd seen, she was pulling in at least $4,000 a month from all of her boyfriends combined, probably more. The apartment Paolo had supposedly bought her. I did some research and found out she was renting it out to another woman doing the same thing, the family emergencies. I started recognizing the patterns, the same stories, recycled and reused with different men. Her mother's medication, her nephew's school fees, her cousin's surgery. They were all real needs, but they were being paid for by multiple people. Carmen was collecting money from all of us for the same expenses. "I need to talk to you," I said when she came home from work one evening. She was counting money, bills I'd never seen before. She tried to hide them when she saw me watching. "What about?" she asked, but she already knew. I could see it in her eyes. "I know about Eduardo. I know about the Australian teacher. I know about the German businessman. I know about the man from New Zealand. I know about all of them." She didn't even try to deny it this time. She just sighed and sat down across from me. "How long have you known? Does it matter?" "I guess not," she said quietly. "So what now? You're going to leave me?" "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer honestly. For once in our marriage, I want you to tell me the truth." "Okay. Was any of it real? Any of your love for me? Any of your promises? Any of our marriage?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Yes," she said finally. "Some of it was real. My gratitude was real. My appreciation was real. My desire to take care of you was real. But the love. I loved the idea of you," she said. "I loved the security you represented. I loved the way you made me feel safe. But love the way you mean it. Love the way you wanted it. Number, that was never real. So, when you married me, when you promised to love only me, you were lying." "I was hoping," she said. "I was hoping I could become the woman you wanted me to be. I was hoping I could change. I was hoping love would be enough. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Love doesn't pay bills, Ron. Love doesn't take care of sick mothers or send children to school. Love doesn't buy security or plan for the future. Love is a luxury I can't afford. So what is this to you? What am I to you? You're my husband," she said simply. "You're my legal status. You're my stability. You're my backup plan for when I get old and the others leave me. And that's enough for you? That's what you call marriage?" "That's what I call survival," she said. "You think I'm a bad woman. You think I'm selfish and greedy and cruel. But you don't understand what it's like to be me. You don't understand what it's like to be a woman in this country with no education, no family money, no options except to use what God gave you. You have a job. You're educated. You speak English. You have options. I have the option to work 12 hours a day for $300 a month. I have the option to be poor and respectable, or clever and comfortable. I chose comfortable. And what about me? What about my feelings? What about my heart? What about your loneliness?" She shot back. "What about your desperate need to feel young again? What about your fantasy of being the hero who saves the beautiful young woman? You got what you wanted too, Ron. You got to feel important. You got to feel needed. You got to feel like a man again." Her words hit me like physical blows. "So you think I deserved this? I think you got exactly what you paid for," she said. "You paid for companionship. You paid for attention. You paid for the illusion of love. You paid for the fantasy of being special, and I gave you all of that. I paid for loyalty. I paid for faithfulness. I paid for a wife. You paid for a woman who would make you feel good about yourself. And I did that. The fact that I was doing it for other men too doesn't change what I gave you. It changes everything. Why? Because your ego can't handle sharing. Because you need to own me completely to feel like a man. Because I loved you," I shouted. "Because I gave you everything. Because I trusted you. And I gave you what you needed too," she said calmly. "I gave you purpose. I gave you excitement. I gave you a reason to get up in the morning. I gave you a new life. You gave me a lie. I gave you what you wanted," she said. "You wanted to be needed. You wanted to feel important. You wanted to feel like you mattered, And for 8 months, you felt all of those things. Isn't that worth something? I stared at her, this woman I'd married, this stranger who was dissecting my deepest needs like a surgeon. You really see nothing wrong with what you did? I see a woman doing what she had to do to survive in a world that gives her very few options. I see a woman taking care of her family and herself the only way she knows how. I see a woman who gave you 8 months of happiness and companionship and love, even if it wasn't the kind of love you thought you were getting. And you see nothing wrong with lying to me. I see everything wrong with it, she said sadly. But I also see no other choice. If I'd told you the truth from the beginning, you never would have stayed. You never would have married me. You never would have loved me. Because it's not love. It's the only kind of love I'm capable of, she said. And it's the only kind of love you're ever going to get from someone like me. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. You can leave me and go back to Canada. You can find yourself a nice Canadian woman your own age who will love you the way you want to be loved. Or you can stay and accept that this is who I am. Accept that I love you differently than you love me. Accept that I'm not going to change. And if I stay, then you stop asking questions. You stop looking at my phone. You stop following me. You let me handle my business, and I'll take care of you the way a wife should. Your business. My survival, Ron. My family's survival. Your survival too, whether you realize it or not. What do you mean? I mean that without my other sources of income, we can't afford to live here. Your pension isn't enough. You've seen the numbers. You know what things cost. She was right. I'd been living beyond my means for months, subsidizing our lifestyle with my savings. But I'd thought it was temporary. I'd thought once Carmen got established in her career, once we got settled, things would get easier. So, you're saying I have to accept this, or leave? I'm saying you have to accept reality, she said. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I survive. If you can't live with it, then you should go home. And if I can, then we'll have a good life together. I'll be a good wife to you. I'll take care of you, love you, be there for you. But I'll also be who I am. I'll also do what I have to do. With other men. With other men? I looked at her silhouette against the window, this woman who had become my wife, my obsession, my destruction. And I realized that I was facing a choice I'd never imagined having to make. Accept her completely, including the parts that were killing me, or lose her completely, including the parts that were keeping me alive. Neither option felt like something I could survive. I left the Philippines on a Tuesday morning. Carmen didn't come to the airport. She was probably with Eduardo, or Miguel, or one of the new ones. I didn't ask. I didn't care anymore. My heart had gone numb somewhere in the middle of all those lies, all those revelations, all those choices I couldn't make. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights after our last conversation, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do. Stay and live with the knowledge that my wife was sleeping with other men. Leave and go back to the emptiness I'd been trying to escape. Neither option felt like living. Both felt like different kinds of death. In the end, the decision made itself. I woke up on Tuesday morning and started packing. Carmen watched me from the doorway, not saying anything, not trying to stop me, not crying, just watching with those beautiful eyes that had started this whole mess. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm sorry. It had to end this way." "Are you?" I asked, folding my clothes into the same suitcase I'd brought 8 months earlier. "Are you really sorry?" "I'm sorry you're hurt," she said. "I'm sorry you can't accept me for who I am. I'm sorry you can't love me the way I am." "I'm sorry too," I said. "I'm sorry I believed in fairy tales. I'm sorry I thought I could matter to someone like you. I'm sorry I wasn't enough." "You were enough," she said quietly. "You were just different from what I needed." "What you needed was a fool," I said. "And I was that. I was exactly that. She didn't argue. She just nodded and walked away. I heard her on the phone a few minutes later, speaking in rapid Tagalog, probably arranging her day now that she didn't have to pretend to be a devoted wife anymore. The taxi ride to the airport felt like a funeral procession. I kept thinking about all the signs I'd ignored, all the red flags I'd dismissed because I was so desperate to be loved. The other passengers on the plane probably thought I was just another expat heading home for a visit. They had no idea I was fleeing the wreckage of my entire life. Vancouver International Airport looked exactly the same as it had 8 months earlier. The same gates, the same shops, the same crowds of people coming and going. But I was different. I was 8 months older, $30,000 poorer, and carrying the weight of a humiliation so complete I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. The flight back to Kelowna was the longest 2 hours of my life. I spent the whole time staring out the window at the mountains and forests, thinking about how I was going to explain this to my daughter, how I was going to explain it to myself, how I was going to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing that I'd been such a fool. Kelowna looked exactly the same. The mountains, the lake, the empty apartment. I'd been so eager to escape. But I was different. I was a different man returning to the same place. The apartment felt smaller than I remembered, more depressing. The furniture was the same, the view was the same, but something essential had changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the knowledge that I could never again believe in the possibility of love the way I had before. I found a message from Carmen waiting for me when I got home. "I'm sorry things ended this way. I hope you find happiness, Ron. You deserve better than what I could give you." I read it 3 times before deleting it. Even her goodbye was calculated, designed to leave me feeling guilty for leaving her. Designed to make me remember her fondly despite everything. Even now, even after everything, she was still managing my emotions, still playing the game, still being exactly who she'd always been. I sat in my apartment for 3 days, not answering my phone, not checking my email, not leaving except to buy groceries. I felt like I was recovering from surgery, like something vital had been removed from me and I was learning how to live without it. The something was hope. The something was the belief that I could be loved. The something was the faith that people meant what they said when they made promises. Carmen had taken all of that from me, and I didn't know how to get it back. I didn't know if I wanted to get it back. Maybe it was better to live without hope than to live with the kind of hope that could destroy you so completely. 6 months later, I was still in Kelowna, still living in the same apartment, still collecting the same pension. But I wasn't the same man who'd left here chasing a dream. I was harder now, more careful. The romantic in me had died somewhere in that Quezon City apartment, buried under the weight of Carmen's casual betrayals and calculated lies. I'd joined a support group for men who'd been scammed by overseas women. There were more of us than I'd expected, dozens of middle-aged Western men who'd lost their savings, their hearts, and their dignity to women who saw us as nothing more than ATM machines with emotions. We met every Thursday in the basement of a community center, sitting in a circle like addicts or cancer patients, sharing our stories of humiliation and loss. "The thing that gets me," said a man named Bill during one of our meetings, "is that part of me still misses her. Even knowing what she was, what she did, I still miss the feeling of being wanted." Bill had lost $40,000 to a Thai woman who'd been married to 2 other foreigners at the same time. His story was different from mine, but the ending was the same. Betrayal, bankruptcy, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding a life from the ashes of shattered dreams. "I understand," I said, because I did. I missed Carmen too. Not the real Carmen, but the version of her I'd fallen in love with. The woman who'd called me her king, who'd promised to love only me, who'd made me feel like I mattered. That woman had never existed except in my imagination, but the grief I felt for her was real. It was the grief of losing someone who'd never been real in the first place. "How do you trust again?" asked another man, a retired teacher named Gary who'd been conned by a Filipino woman very similar to Carmen. "How do you ever believe anyone again?" Nobody had a good answer for that. We were all struggling with the same question. How do you rebuild faith after it's been so completely shattered? How do you open your heart after it's been so expertly manipulated? How do you believe in love after you've learned that love can be bought and sold like any other commodity? I started volunteering at the local community center, helping other seniors with their computers, teaching them about online safety. I couldn't save my own money, but maybe I could save someone else's. Every time I helped an elderly man understand how romance scams worked, it felt like a small victory against the darkness. A small way of making meaning out of my own disaster. These women, I'd tell them, they're professionals. They know exactly what to say, exactly how to make you feel. They study lonely men like we're textbooks. They know our weaknesses better than we do. Some of them listened. Some of them thanked me and promised to be more careful. Others looked at me like I was just a bitter old man who couldn't accept that a beautiful young woman might actually love him. I recognized that look because I'd worn it myself. The look of a man who thinks he's different, who thinks his situation is special, who thinks the woman who found him online really does love him for who he is. I'd been that man. I'd been exactly that man. The apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt quiet, which was different. Quiet was peaceful. Empty was lonely. I'd learned the difference. I'd learned to appreciate the silence, the predictability, the safety of not having to wonder who my wife was sleeping with or what lie she was telling me today. I'd learned to appreciate the freedom of not having to manage someone else's emotions or support someone else's family or live up to someone else's expectations. I was alone, but I was also free. Free from the exhausting work of being Carmen's husband. Free from the constant drain of trying to be enough for someone who would never have enough. Free from the daily humiliation of sharing the woman I loved with men who meant nothing to her except as sources of income. Sometimes, late at night, I'd get messages from Carmen, updates about her life, requests for money, attempts to rekindle our relationship. "I miss you," she'd write. "I made a mistake letting you go. You were the best husband I ever had." The best husband she'd ever had. Not the only husband. Not the husband she'd chosen over all others. Just the best one in her collection. I'd delete these messages without reading them completely. That chapter of my life was closed, and I wasn't interested in sequels. I'd learned that Carmen was like a drug. Even knowing what she was, even knowing what she did to me, part of me still craved her. Still missed the way she made me feel when she was trying to make me feel good. Still remembered the high of believing I was special to someone so beautiful. But I also remembered the crash. The devastating low of learning that none of it was real. That I was just one of many. That my love was just another transaction in her business of breaking hearts for profit. I never married again. I never went back to the Philippines. I never trusted another woman who told me I was her only love. But I also never stopped believing that real love existed somewhere, for someone, just not for me. Not anymore. Not the kind of love I'd thought I wanted. I was 55 years old, $8,000 in the bank, and finally done chasing dreams that were never meant for me. Linda had been right about one thing. I was predictable. I was boring. I was the kind of man who drove the same route every day for 26 years, who ate the same breakfast every morning, who watched the same television shows every night. But I was also the kind of man who was loyal, who was faithful, who was honest. The kind of man who meant it when he said, "I love you," and "forever," and "only you." The kind of man who still believed in promises, even after learning how easily they could be broken. Carmen had seen that in me from the beginning. She'd seen my loneliness, my loyalty, my desperate need to be needed. She'd seen my weaknesses, and she'd exploited them perfectly. She'd given me just enough real affection to keep me hooked, just enough genuine connection to make me believe the rest was real too. She'd been a master at her craft, and I'd been the perfect victim. But I'd also been a real person with real feelings who'd offered real love to someone who saw it as just another commodity to be managed. And maybe that counted for something. Maybe the fact that I'd been willing to give everything, to risk everything, to believe in everything, said something good about who I was. Even if it had destroyed me. The mountains outside my window looked the same as they had before I left, but I saw them differently now. They weren't a prison anymore. They were home. They were constant. They were real. And home, I'd learned, was something you had to build from the inside out. No one else could give it to you. No one else could take it away. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine. And after everything I'd been through, everything I'd lost, everything I'd learned about myself and about love and about the world, that was enough. It had to be enough. Because it was all I had left. My daughter called me one evening, about a year after I'd returned from the Philippines. "Dad, I heard you got married," she said. "Someone at work said they saw something on Facebook. Are you okay? You never told me." I sat in my chair, looking out at the lake, trying to figure out how to explain what had happened, how to tell her that her father had been such a fool, how to admit that Linda had been right about me all along. It didn't work out. I said finally, "I'm back in Kelowna now. I'm fine." "What happened? Was she not who you thought she was?" My daughter's voice was gentle, concerned. It was the most interest she'd shown in my life in years. "No," I said. "She wasn't who I thought she was, but maybe I wasn't who I thought I was either. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you were hoping for something different, something better. I was hoping for something that doesn't exist," I said. "At least, not for me." "That's not true," she said. "You're a good man, Dad. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be happy." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm done looking for it. I'm done believing in it. I'm done making myself vulnerable to people who see that vulnerability as weakness." "Don't say that," she said. "Don't let one bad experience ruin your faith in people. There are good women out there. Women who would appreciate you for who you are. Women my age," I said. "Women who've been through what I've been through. Women who understand that love isn't a fairy tale." "Love isn't supposed to be a fairy tale," she said. "It's supposed to be real. It's supposed to be between equals. It's supposed to be honest." "I know that now," I said. "I wish I'd known it 8 months ago." We talked for another hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years. She told me about her job, her boyfriend, her plans for the future. I told her about my support group, my volunteer work, my slow process of rebuilding my life. "I'm proud of you," she said before hanging up, "for trying, for taking a risk, for believing in something, even if it didn't work out." "I'm not proud of myself," I said. "I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. I'm humiliated." "You were lonely," she said. "You were looking for connection. You were hoping for love. There's nothing shameful about that. There's something shameful about being so stupid," I said. "About being so desperate that you'll believe anything anyone tells you." "You weren't stupid," she said. "You were hopeful, and hope isn't stupid, even when it gets you hurt." After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. Hope isn't stupid, even when it gets you hurt. Maybe she was right. Maybe the problem wasn't that I'd hoped. Maybe the problem was that I'd hoped for the wrong things with the wrong person. Maybe I'd been looking for someone to save me instead of looking for someone to share my life with. Maybe I'd been so desperate to feel young and desirable and important that I'd ignored every red flag, every warning sign, every moment of doubt. Maybe I'd been so afraid of being alone that I'd chosen to be with someone who was using me instead of loving me. But maybe that didn't make me stupid. Maybe that just made me human. Maybe every man who'd ever been lonely, who'd ever been rejected, who'd ever been told he wasn't good enough, would understand how I'd fallen for Carmen's lies. Maybe the real tragedy wasn't that I'd been fooled. Maybe the real tragedy was that there were women like Carmen in the world, women who'd learned to weaponize love, who'd learned to turn men's deepest needs against them. Maybe the real tragedy was that there were men like me, so starved for affection that we'd pay any price for even the illusion of being loved. I started thinking about the other men in my support group. Bill, who'd lost $40,000, Gary, who'd been conned by a woman just like Carmen, All of us middle-aged, divorced, lonely, desperate to feel like we mattered to someone. All of us easy targets for women who'd learned to see our loneliness as opportunity. All of us ashamed of our stupidity, our gullibility, our desperate need to be loved. But maybe we weren't the problem. Maybe the problem was a world that told men like us that we were worthless unless we had a woman to validate us. Maybe the problem was a culture that taught us that our only value was what we could provide, what we could pay for, what we could buy. Maybe the problem was that we'd never learned to love ourselves enough to recognize when someone was taking advantage of us. Maybe the problem was that we'd never learned to be happy alone, so we'd accept any kind of company, even company that was destroying us. I thought about Carmen, probably back in Quezon City, probably managing her portfolio of lonely foreign men, probably telling each of them that they were special, that they were different, that they were her only love. I thought about the other women in her group chat, sharing tips on how to extract maximum value from minimum emotional investment. I thought about all the Western men who were probably, right now, sitting in internet cafes or hotel rooms, sending money to women who saw them as nothing more than walking ATMs. I thought about how many hearts were being broken, how many lives were being destroyed, how many dreams were being shattered. And I realized that my story wasn't unique. It was just one of thousands, maybe millions, of similar stories. Men who'd been told they were boring, predictable, worthless by the women in their own countries, who'd gone looking for love in places where their money could buy them the illusion of desirability. Men who'd confused transaction with emotion, who'd mistaken gratitude for love, who'd believed that someone could actually want them for who they were instead of what they could provide. We were all variations on the same theme, all casualties of the same war between loneliness and desperation, but maybe recognizing that helped somehow. Maybe knowing that I wasn't the only fool, wasn't the only victim, wasn't the only man who'd been stupid enough to believe in fairy tales, made the pain a little more bearable. Maybe there was some comfort in shared suffering, some strength in collective humiliation. Maybe the support group wasn't just a place to wallow in our mistakes, but a place to learn from them, to grow from them, to become better men because of them. I started taking my volunteer work more seriously. Instead of just helping seniors with their computers, I started actively looking for men who might be vulnerable to romance scams. Men who spent too much time on dating sites, who talked about women they'd never met like they were already in relationships with them. Men who were sending money overseas, who were making plans to travel to countries they'd never visited to meet women they'd only known online. Men who were making the same mistakes I'd made, following the same path I'd followed, heading toward the same destruction I'd experienced. Let me tell you about Carmen, I'd say to them. Let me tell you about the woman who promised to love only me but was sharing that love with 5 other men. Let me tell you about the 8 months of lies, the $30,000 I lost, the humiliation of discovering that my wife saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. Some of them listened. Some of them thanked me and promised to be more careful. Others got angry, accused me of being bitter, insisted that their situation was different. "You don't understand," they'd say. "She's not like that. She really loves me." "That's exactly what I thought," I'd tell them. "That's exactly what every man in my support group thought. That's exactly what every man who's ever been scammed by a woman overseas thought. You're not different. Your situation isn't special, and she doesn't love you." It was harsh, but it was true. And sometimes harsh truth was the only thing that could save someone from making the same mistake I'd made. Sometimes you had to be cruel to be kind. Sometimes you had to destroy someone's fantasy to save their reality. I wasn't always successful. I'd see the same men weeks later, having sent more money, having made more plans, having ignored every warning I'd given them. But occasionally, I'd get through to someone. Occasionally, I'd save someone from the fate that had befallen me. And each time that happened, each time I prevented another lonely man from being destroyed by a woman who saw his loneliness as opportunity, I felt like I was making some small amends for my own stupidity, like I was turning my disaster into something useful, something meaningful, like I was making sure that Carmen hadn't destroyed me for nothing. The years passed slowly. I settled into a routine that was predictable but peaceful. I woke up at the same time every day, ate the same breakfast, took the same walk around the lake. I volunteered at the community center. attended my support group meetings, helped other men avoid the trap I'd fallen into. I learned to appreciate the quiet. I learned to find satisfaction in small things. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I learned to build a life that didn't depend on someone else's validation, someone else's love, someone else's presence. I learned to be enough for myself. It wasn't the life I'd dreamed of when I first discovered those expat forums. It wasn't the adventure I'd imagined when I first started chatting with Carmen. It wasn't the happily ever after I'd believed in when I stood in that church in Quezon City and promised to love, honor, and cherish until death do us part. But it was real. It was honest. It was mine. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could really ask for. Maybe the mistake I'd made wasn't in hoping for love, but in hoping for love that was too good to be true. Maybe the lesson I'd learned wasn't that love didn't exist, but that real love was different from fantasy love. That real love was between equals, was built on honesty, was earned through time and trust and shared experience. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I needed to love myself before I could love anyone else. That I needed to be complete alone before I could be complete with someone else. That I needed to stop looking for someone to save me and start looking for someone to share my already full life with. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I was enough. Not as a provider, not as a rescuer, not as a solution to someone else's problems, but as a person. As a man who'd worked hard, who'd been faithful, who'd tried to do right by everyone he'd ever loved. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that Linda had been wrong about me. That I wasn't boring or predictable or worthless. That I was steady, reliable, loyal. That those weren't weaknesses to be ashamed of, but strengths to be proud of. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that Carmen had been wrong about me too. That I wasn't just an ATM with emotions. That I was a human being with real feelings, real needs, real worth. That I deserved better than what she'd given me. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I'd been wrong about myself. That I didn't need to be exciting or adventurous or young to be worthy of love. That I didn't need to change myself to be acceptable to someone else. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that the right person would love me for who I was, not for what I could provide. That the right person would want to build a life with me, not use me to fund their life. That the right person would choose me, not collect me. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I'd rather be alone and real than together and fake. That I'd rather have no love than false love. That I'd rather be lonely than lied to. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I was going to be okay. That I was stronger than I'd thought. That I could survive losing everything and still find reasons to keep living. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that home wasn't a place or a person, but a feeling. A feeling of safety, of peace, of belonging. A feeling I could create for myself, by myself, without needing anyone else's permission or validation. Maybe the lesson I'd learned was that I was home, right here, in this apartment, in this city, in this life I'd built from the ashes of my broken dreams. I was home, and I was enough, and I was going to be okay. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was the ending I'd earned, and maybe that was the most important lesson of all. That sometimes the best you can do is survive your own mistakes, learn from them, and try to help others avoid making the same ones. That sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going. That sometimes the greatest victory is not in getting what you want, but in learning to want what you have. That sometimes the truest love is the love you give yourself, the forgiveness you offer yourself, the acceptance you show yourself, the kindness you extend to the broken parts of yourself that made mistakes, that trusted the wrong person, that believed in the wrong dream. I was 57 years old, still living in the same apartment, still collecting the same pension, still alone. But I wasn't the same man who'd left Kelowna 8 years ago chasing a fantasy. I was wiser now, harder, but also softer, more careful, but also more compassionate. I was a man who'd loved and lost, who'd trusted and been betrayed, who'd hoped and been disappointed. I was a man who'd made terrible mistakes and survived them. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is warn others about the dangers you've discovered. I was a man who'd learned that real love might be rare, but it was worth waiting for, worth hoping for, worth believing in, even after you've learned how easily it can be counterfeited. I was a man who'd learned that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. That being single wasn't the same as being incomplete. That being careful wasn't the same as being bitter. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the most important relationship you can have is with yourself. That sometimes the most important person you can take care of is yourself. That sometimes the most important love you can give is to yourself. I was a man who'd learned that home wasn't something you found, but something you built. That peace wasn't something you achieved, but something you practiced. That happiness wasn't something you chased, but something you chose. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge against someone who'd wronged you was to live well without them. To build a life so full and meaningful that their absence became irrelevant. To become so complete in yourself that you couldn't be broken by anyone else. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth, even when it hurts. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is warn someone about danger, even when they don't want to hear it. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is forgive yourself. Not for being stupid, but for being human. Not for making mistakes, but for having the courage to try. Not for failing, but for caring enough to risk failure. I was a man who'd learned that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the deepest pain. That sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most complete brokenness. That sometimes the clearest vision comes from the darkest experiences. I was a man who'd learned that Carmen had been wrong about one thing. Love wasn't a luxury I couldn't afford. It was a necessity I couldn't live without. But it had to be real love, honest love, reciprocal love. It had to be love that chose me, not love that used me. Love that wanted me, not love that needed me. Love that saw me, not love that saw through me. Love that accepted me, not love that changed me. And maybe that love was still out there somewhere. Maybe it was waiting for me to be ready for it. Maybe it was waiting for me to stop looking for it and start being worthy of it. Maybe it was waiting for me to love myself enough to recognize it when it came. Maybe it was waiting for me to be whole enough to share my life with someone else without losing myself in the process. Maybe it was waiting for me to be brave enough to try again, even after everything I'd been through. Maybe it was waiting for me to be wise enough to know the difference between love and lies, between affection and manipulation, between partnership and exploitation. Maybe it was waiting for me to be patient enough to build it slowly, honestly, carefully. Maybe it was waiting for me to be strong enough to walk away from anything that wasn't real, anything that didn't serve me, anything that didn't honor the man I'd become. Maybe it was waiting for me to be ready for it. And maybe, just maybe, I was getting there. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who deserved real love. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could recognize it, protect it, nurture it, and return it. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could love and be loved in return. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could build a life with someone else without losing himself in the process. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could trust again, hope again, risk again. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could forgive himself for past mistakes and make better choices in the future. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could look at his reflection and see someone worth loving. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could sit in his quiet apartment and feel at peace with who he was and where he was in life. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could say that his story with Carmen, as painful as it was, had been worth it if it led him to this place of wisdom, strength, and self-knowledge. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could say that he was grateful for the experience, not because it had been good, but because it had made him better. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could say that he was ready for whatever came next, whether it was love or loneliness, partnership or solitude, adventure or quiet contentment. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could say that he was enough, just as he was, right where he was, with what he had. Maybe I was finally becoming the man who could say that he was home,